Hey, so today I'm going to be doing a demo of my new toys. So I've got the Shining 3D AoralScan 3. This is the wireless unit. And then I've also got the Metismile facial scanner. And so one of my favorite things about this is the ability to marry those two together within their software. So most of the scanners for facial scanning that I've used in the past, you would have to manually stitch those. And that doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's really a pain in the butt. And so I'm just going to demo how I can do my intraoral scan. I'll do a facial scan on myself and then marry those two together within the software. So let's go ahead and jump into this. So I'm going to go ahead by starting with the intraoral scan. So I'll go to Dental Launcher and we'll finish that. That was just when I was playing around with it. As you can see, I'm not extremely experienced with this scanner. I've literally done 2 model scans and 1 scan on myself. So we're going to say we're doing a new order. We're going to just punch in my name here and it pops up automatically. And then let's say that we're doing scans for orthodontics. That way it's not asking us to do like a prep identification or anything like that. All right, so we'll save this and now we are ready to scan. Okay, so you can see the battery looks good and everything. I hate scanning myself. Oh, getting lost here. All right, so I've done most of my upper scan. Just wanted to show a couple little things. So if you double click this, you've got the little play button that will let you go back to scanning. You've got this button, and so I think this is really cool. So you don't want to have to deglove and get the camera or the keyboard all dirty and stuff for infection control. And so what this is allowing me to do is just use the wand to rotate this around. And as I do that, I see I've got a couple little holes on that canine area. And everything else looks good. All right, so double tap again. And now we're right back into scanning. All right, so let's complete that one. We're good there. I could have done it with the wireless wand, but we'll go ahead and just click the button. Now we're ready to do the lower jaw. All right, let's look at our scan again. Double tap. And let's see if there are any holes. Nothing of significance, so we're going to go ahead and complete that one. So that's the next button if you didn't want to click next on the keyboard. All right, so now we are ready for the buccal bite. All right, so we've got our upper and lower. Let's see. I've not even played. Oh, second bite. So now it wants the second bite. All right, so I'm going to just let go and look here. You can see I've got my 2 bites, and obviously that's a really good bite because you can see the intensity here with your color scale is red. I'm basically red throughout the arch with my old ground down teeth. So everything looks great here. We're going to go ahead and finish that. Scanner can go up. All right, so now we can edit our bite, or I'm sorry, edit the data. I'm just going to use this little select tool. I really like this select tool because you can basically just paint a border and it just trims everything right to there. So very fast. You don't have to use, delete buttons and all that kind of thing. All right, if we don't want all of that palette, we could just get rid of that. And then tongue space. All right, so that looks very good. We're going to finish that. Go to send. And let's finish it up. And we'll export it as well. All right, so there's our data for the intraoral scan. Again, I'm not very proficient at scanning myself, but got the job done. It wasn't the fastest, but the scanner itself really is fast. I'm going to finish that, and now we're done there. Now, I'm going to add the facial scan to the mix. Okay, so this is the Metismile. Let's go to Facial Scan Launcher. We're going to do a new order, and once again, if I just punch in my initials, since I'm already in the system, I can indicate that it's for me. We're going to do this for orthodontics. Now, the reason I like to choose orthodontics is that's going to give you the option to do both a smiling scan and a retracted scan. So we'll choose that, we'll save it. Now, before I want to start scanning, I'm going to go ahead and import the intraoral scan data. All right, so let's do that. Since I have the Shining 3D scanner, you know, I can just import the project file from the Shining software, but I did ask to clarify, and you can use this with any third-party intraoral scanner or a desktop scanner for that matter. Okay, so what is today's date? That's got to be it. All right, so I'm going to just choose the project, but you can import third-party data. So now we're ready to scan. So the handle, if you're going to actually scan yourself, which is not the easiest way to do this, but if you are going to do that, you can just hold the handle like this. Okay, so I'm going to find my distance. You see how right there is where you want to be in
3,
suitable.
2,
and then
1.
all right, that should be good. All right, there is scan 1. My eyes are a little bit wonky just because I'm looking down at the screen. You know, normally if you're doing this on a patient, tell them to just pick a spot on the wall and just focus on that regardless of what you're doing, and then just smile real big and stay still. It's kind of hard for me to stay still as I'm moving my own arms around, trying to keep it at the right distance and stuff. But given that, I think this actually turned out pretty good. Great. Okay. So if you wanted to now add a second scan with the teeth or the cheeks retracted, you would come up here and not this button. This is to start aligning things, STLs, face, different facial scans. We're going to add a step. We're going to do face data with the mouth retracted. All right. Once again, I'm working by myself, so I had to rig up my own little cheek retractor. But the reason you do this is that you need one of the scans to really capture the detail of the teeth so that you can accurately stitch the intraoral scans in there. And so that's what this one will do.
3, 2, 1.
All right, that's good enough. So if you want to put it back on the stand, there's a little button right here. Punch that. Now you've got a nice stand to set this down so that it's not going to topple over by accident. And we'll let this process. All right, so I'm going to edit a little bit of data. And I'll just use the brush here. Let's look at our previous face scan. I'm going to cut down on a little bit of the data there. The only reason I'm doing that is because you're just cutting down on the overall file size, how much data it's got to crunch, all of that. So I don't need anything below the neck. Alright, that looks good. Click the confirm button, and now we need to stitch all of this together. Okay, so let's now click on the face align button. And you can see the starting point is it's going to ask to align the intraoral scans, right? Because we did tell it we have intraoral scans and we imported those. So you've got a couple options here. You can do manual alignment, or you can just hit the auto align. And this has to be one of my favorite features to this, because again, stitching these things can be a huge pain in the butt. And then you've got to really understand how to manually evaluate whether you stitched it properly. Because, you know, for the longest time, I've been hesitant to recommend, you know, for everyone to get a facial scanner, just because if you don't stitch the face and the intraoral scan, the CT and all that properly, you're almost worse off than not using it at all, because you can get tricked into thinking that you've got a good match when you don't. All right, so it appears to be good, but how do I really know? That's where you can go to occlusion view and check this out. That is a really, really useful feature. I can't stress that enough. All right, so if you're seeing green, that means it's a dead zero stitch, and your scale goes blue to 1. So you would expect, right, where it transitions up into the lip, where it's not getting as good a scan, that's not going to be as good. But that's an excellent stitch. I am super happy with that, and that's going to save me a ton of time in the next steps. All right, so that's great. I'm happy with that. And now you would do your face-to-face stitch. All right, so once again, we've got smiling, we've got retracted. Let's see if the auto align works. All right, so it's obviously close, but let's once again do that occlusion view, and that's what I want to see. Okay, so again, if you've not done a lot of facial scanning, it's really hard to express to you how valuable this is. When you start trying to manually stitch these, and say like Blue Sky Plan, you just did 2 independent scans, retracted and smiling, and then you manually have to do all that. It is a huge pain in the butt, and it's easy to trick yourself and get a poor stitch. But it's hard to fool this thing, right? If I'm looking and I'm seeing green, especially in the areas of my face that I wouldn't expect to be changing from smiling to retracted, right? When you smile, unless you're doing your eyes up, your forehead, your nose, those things are not changing all that significantly. And so you can tell that they are actually matched up really well. Same thing with incisal edge, right? My incisal edge doesn't change from one to the other. And you see how that's green, it's a dead zero. So very happy with this. We're going to now go ahead and save all of this and go to pre-design. All right, so if you wanted to do further trimming of anything, you can. Let me just show you here how this stuff is matched up. These transparency views are very nice. See the teeth within there. All right. If you want to turn off the texture and just evaluate these, you know, like an STL, you can do that. All right. Once again. But for a facial scanner to be useful, you've got to pick up this level of detail in the teeth. If you don't, and there are many cheap ones out there that are available, if you don't capture detail of the teeth, it's worse than useless, because now you have no idea if you're stitching things incorrectly. So don't get fooled into some of those super cheap, you know, $500 scanners. They're not going to cut it. Your iPhone is not going to cut it for purposes of dentistry. If you want to make a bobblehead doll, knock yourself out, but it's not going to work for this. All right, so I haven't actually played with this. Let's try this lip line extract. All right. So if you're wanting to see the high detail teeth underneath and get rid of this, you can do that. Let's see what auto extraction does. Ooh, that's nice. We'll OK that. And now, as you see here, you've got the lip line is cut out so that you can actually see the high detail intraoral scans underneath that. And that looks like a perfect alignment. Let's turn the texture off. Looks like a dead-on match to me. All right, so we're done with it. Let's go and send. And at this point, we could complete it. It'll give you the chance to export. So I'm going to export all of this data, and I'll do it both in OBJ and STL. And we'll confirm. Now I do know in the beta version they've got the ability to stitch in your cone beam data as well, which is a really cool feature. But since that's still in beta, I won't show that just yet. But here's where I want to show you the value of having this within where everything's already stitched up. Your intraoral scans are stitched to the face. Each facial scan is stitched to one another. It's so valuable. So I'm going to go ahead and in Blue Sky Plan open up a project of myself, my own cone beam. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import the STL model, and I'm going to need to go to the file folder where I just did all of that. Alright, so here's what I would suggest. Import your maxillary model first. Remember, all of this data in the Shining folder, that's all stitched together. What's going to be the most reliable thing to stitch to your CT of those available models? It's going to be your maxillary model, more than likely. So I'm going to find upper jaw OBJ. That's a maxilla. Okay, so we've got a good stitch with our maxillary model, and now the reason I like to do that is because when we bring everything else in, remember, they're already in the correct orientation to one another, and so when we pull later scans in, facial scan, lower, right, we can bring them back into their original orientation, but relative to where I've placed the maxilla. Okay, so let me just show you how I would do that with one of the models, and you would do the same thing for all of them basically. So we could go to File and hit Import Face Scan, but when you do that, it's going to lead you through a wizard workflow to actually stitch that face in, and I actually don't need to do that here. Remember, our facial scans, our STLs, all of that was stitched up together outside of the program. I don't want to have to stitch that. And so rather, what I'm going to do is just open up the file folder. Here is all of those scans that I exported, and we are going to bring in the, let's do the face open scan right here first. Now one thing I do want to point out, I've had the issue in the past of when I import OBJ facial scans, they appear to all have like cracks and weird looks to them, and it doesn't affect that much, but it is annoying. The reason you get that is because when you import this facial scan, you need to do it from a folder that not only has the OBJ, but that has the corresponding MTL file and the JPEG file. And that all does get exported by default when you do your facial scan. But don't just think that if only an OBJ is in the folder that it's going to come in and look good. Okay, so I'm going to do, let's do this face scan open, and then actually I'm sorry, that's the STL. I want to get the OBJ. So here's my OBJ files. We'll just drag this, drop it in, and what you're going to see is this thing is going to be out of position, right? That is not in the correct position. But I want you to remember that we have, outside of this program, these files were once already oriented perfectly to one another. And so I don't want to lose that. Rather, what I want to do is just bring this one back into orientation with that. So if you have models that were previously all stitched together, and then let's say you bring one in and you reposition it into Blue Sky's understanding of up, down, side to side, all that, right? This has been moved from its original orientation, the intraoral scan. All I've got to do is say I want to take this open face scan and stitch it to another model. And then what model do you want to stitch it to? Well, the upper jaw is the one that I've brought in. Used to be in correct orientation, and now I've changed it in blue sky. Do not check points, because if you do points, it's just going to make you do a click, point between point. Just leave that undone. Now click OK. And as you can see, this has brought this right back into its original orientation with my intraoral scan. All right, and you can see we got a great stitch there. All right, and then I can do that with every other subsequent model. So I'm going to now come in and I'm going to grab this face scan that the lip line was cut out of. All right, it's out of orientation, but now I could make my destination either one of these. Doesn't really matter. So now that one is integrated. All right, we need to bring in the lower jaw, so I'll grab that. All right, now the lower jaw is interesting because I'm not in full occlusion in my scans here. I was more or less at a slightly open centric bite. So if I bring this now into orientation with everything, all right, there it is. It's all good. But if by chance your CT was taken with a slightly open bite or in full occlusion and your facial scan and intraoral scans were not, you shouldn't expect those to match up. So I'm curious to see here. I'm going to put a different model outline on both of our intraoral scans and see if in fact they're matching up. And actually this CT scan, now that I'm remembering, I was in full occlusion. So in doing that, by default, everything is stitched, but oftentimes in your CT scans, you're going to have them on a bite fork or something like that. So if your intraoral scans are in full occlusion, but your CT is not, then you might have to import two of these lower jaws and let one of them be stitched to the CT, but the other be in the occlusion position. All right. So I do recommend for any kind of full arch case or comprehensive case that you scan them all the same. And that for me is in-centric at the intended VDO you want to restore them at. So I'd take my CT there, my intraoral scan there, and my facial scan there, so there's no discrepancy between them. Okay, but now we've got all of these scans in here. I'm going to go back to just the black background so that we can perceive the color. We've got our CT data, and it's stitched. Right, so I've brought in all of these models, and I could continue bringing in more of them, but my biggest point is I didn't have to do any manual stitching in here. And even if I had, it's very difficult to manually stitch this because the teeth end up being your only real reference point to do it on, and it's just a tough stitch unless you're really experienced with this. So incredibly valuable that all of that gets done outside of the program, and it gets done really well. So that now when I open the CT of the patient, I can just bring in the maxillary model and stitch it because that's going to be the best one. And then everything else, I don't stitch, I just bring back into orientation with the original maxillary model. So at this point, you've got everything you need if you need to do smile design, wax ups, implant rehabs, whatever kind of planning you need to do. And you can do this in exocad as well. But extremely useful that you can do all of this within that Shining software. And again, the facial scanner, the Metismile, will allow you to import scans from any of the Shining 3D scanners, but it does also let you bring them in from third-party scanners. So your Metit, your PrimeScan, whatever. As long as it's an open file format, you can bring those in and it will stitch those as well. So anyway, I hope you found that helpful. This is something I use a lot in our big full mouth cases that we work on, and I just find it incredibly useful. And man, now that I have this Metismile, it has made my life so much simpler to get all of that stitching done in their software. All right, thanks.